Hello and welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today is Tuesday, January 28th. Hopefully everybody's having a good day so far today. This is episode 480 of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. I thank you, as always, for joining me. For those tuning in on YouTube, make sure to please like and subscribe. Of course, appreciate those of you tuning in on all the different audio podcast platforms as well. We are now one day removed from the Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji press conference, really officially one day into the Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji regime, as yesterday it became officially official with the press conference. And of course, a lot of positive takeaways from yesterday that gets a lot of Jet fans excited. Of course, wins and all that stuff matter most, but all we got right now is one press conference. It's still only January, and the early signs are you at least can be optimistic about the future. So today, I want to break down some comments made by Woody Johnson yesterday. We talked a little bit about it yesterday late in the podcast, but want to dive into them a little bit more today and give some more thoughts, as yesterday's episode was more about Muji and Glenn. And I also want to give you some potential coaching staff updates here, as we've got some interviews happening, what's happening with the offensive coordinator, take a look at some options for Aaron Glenn's staff, along with the latest reports. So we'll get you that here as well later on. As always, though, before we begin, we've got to tell you about our podcast partners, starting with our friends over at BetUS, America's favorite online sportsbook. It's the big game. It's coming up just about 12 days from now. The Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles will face off in New Orleans for Super Bowl 59. And if you want to get in on any of the betting action for the Super Bowl, check out BetUS and use my link in the description of this video to get a 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000. Also, our friends over at SeatGeek, if you're looking for tickets for any sporting event or any of the best in entertainment, plays, concerts, shows, you name it, SeatGeek has it. Promo code BUBSONSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase at SeatGeek. Get yourself out to some awesome events. And also, of course, Huga House, if you want any of their awesome selection of hats, they've also got sweatshirts. Use promo code BUBS for 15% off any purchase. And when you use that promo code on your first purchase, you'll get your second half hat 30% off when you use that code. So check them out and get yourself some awesome swag. So here we go. Episode 480 in the trenches with Gang Green. Thank you for those of you tuning in. Appreciate the support as always. So yesterday, of course, Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji's press conference really felt like officially day one of the new regime as they were introduced. Of course, a lot of positives to take away. I think a lot of Aaron Glenn's quotes fire you up. Him getting into a battle a little bit with Samini and the media, I think was good to see, especially after what we saw the last, 4.5 years here with Robert Saleh, where he was very, just didn't provide a whole lot of energy to the media, always tried to be the media's friend, wasn't the best with answering questions, just a lot of frustration, I think, from that whole regime. So yesterday was definitely a nice change. But I want to get to some comments here made by Woody Johnson. And look, we all understand Woody Johnson's been an awful owner. He's been a disaster. 14 years, a lot of it does fall on his plate, especially the last couple of years. Last year, obviously, you get the bombshell report. You've gotten multiple bombshell reports now, one after last season. You got another one late in this past 2024 season when the season was already over there. I believe that came out in December. It's been nothing but a disaster. But Woody Johnson did take some accountability yesterday. He did say some things yesterday that I think as a Jets fan, at least you can sit here and just hope that maybe this is finally a point where Woody Johnson just takes a step back and lets the football people make football decisions. And his quote yesterday was, "I have to look in the mirror and be a better owner." This is really the first time in a very long time yesterday he actually spoke to the media. And I'll be honest, I don't think his introduction for either Muji and Glenn was very good. He's not very good in front of the media. He's always stumbling, always feels like he's kind of lost. It always feels like he's trying to figure out what he's going to say. And it never comes out fresh or clean with Woody, which is annoying because you would like him to speak on some of these reports and all this stuff and why this team is where they were last year. But that's besides the point. It's a new era. It's a new day. You're trying to be positive. But that quote there, right? I have to look in the mirror and be a better owner. That was clearly one of the bigger quotes from yesterday. Obviously, the biggest quote from Woody Johnson himself. And you have to at least say, all right, he takes accountability. At least for the first time, this is happening where maybe he's starting to get it. Maybe he's starting to understand after everything that went wrong last year, after really just the last 2 years in general, right? You bring in a Hall of Fame quarterback. You bring in a guy of Aaron Rodgers' stature, and the team still can't get on the right track. And I understand you have all the injuries, but the injury in 2023 and all that stuff. But there was so much going on behind the scenes, and the culture and his power and his influence on decisions, especially over the last season or so. It's a disgrace. And yesterday's comment, at least, and he's got to prove it, but maybe it's the start for Woody Johnson of taking a step back and recognizing I have to be better. I have to do better. I have to let the football people make football decisions. And you do wonder if hopefully maybe last year was sort of the last straw for Woody Johnson, where he kind of did everything his way again, took over, went full on panic mode. And that was like it. That was like his rock bottom moment. And now it's like, okay, hire Muji, hire Glenn, let them work together. I'm going to stay out of it. And that needs to be the case. You hope that comment yesterday wasn't just empty, wasn't just him and a bunch of hot air. You hope that quote yesterday leads to him stepping back and him allowing the football people in this organization that you just hired after a lengthy search make the necessary decisions to get this team out of the doldrums, to get this team out of the basement of the NFL and get back on track. So we've got to hope. You look at in this city, in New York City, you look at this town. Ownership in this town has proven there's been a couple examples, the biggest being the Knicks and James Dolan, right? An awful owner, a guy that, before the Knicks hired Leon Rose and got this team back on track, the Knicks were a disaster, and Dolan was the front of it. He stepped away, hired the right basketball people, and he doesn't get his hands on stuff anymore. Cuts the checks. Woody, you cut the checks. You write the checks. That's what you do, not anything else. The Mets as well, a little bit of a different example just because the Wilpons sold the team. But you look at Steve Cohen, hired David Stearns as the president of baseball operations, and he is running the show. What does Steve Cohen do? Negotiates the contracts. He cuts the checks. He's got one of the deepest pockets, forgetting baseball, he's got some of the deepest pockets in all of sports. And look at what the Mets have been able to do, turning it around from where they were with the Wilpons to where they are now, because they have an ownership that hired the right people, and they let those people make the decisions. And what they do is write the contracts. That's what they do. And that's what Woody Johnson needs to do. And you hope that comment, I have to look in the mirror and be a better owner. First of all, at least he's taken somewhat of accountability, even if it's maybe not true. At least it comes off as I'm taking accountability. I'm recognizing the dumpster fire that this organization has been, especially since I've taken over really in 2000, not nearly enough success for this team. And you hope it's the start of really a new era for him as well, where just step away. Just step away. And look, he did, allow Douglas and Saleh some leeway. But once things got off to a bumpy start, he really started to get involved kind of after 2022. And over the last 2 years, it's obviously been a disaster. That can't be the case. You've got to let Glenn and Muji figure this thing out. It's what it has to be. Another quote from Woody here, we'll play a clip, also had discussions on the Rodgers decision, which we talked a little bit about yesterday. But again, it just kind of goes into our whole point here of Muji and Glenn allowing them to make the decisions and Woody not getting involved.
Your personal feeling about Aaron Rodgers returning?
I'm going to leave that to them.
they've got to take a look at how the team's composed and what they think they need and put all that together.
Woody, would you welcome Aaron Rodgers back if your coach and general manager would like to go that route?
Absolutely. Yeah, if they want him back, Aaron's a talent for sure. He's a Hall of Famer.
Will you voice your opinion on that, Woody, or is it really just on specific?
No, I'm not going to voice my opinion. Okay. No, that's up to them.
It's the right thing to do. You've heard a lot of reports that Woody and Rodgers' relationship wasn't great. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Rodgers, let's be honest here, and we'll have a lot of time to talk about Rodgers. He gives this team the best chance to win. If Glenn and Muji want him back, he should be back for 2025. Period. All right, I want to move on now. There's the Woody Johnson stuff. I now want to move on to some stuff on the coaching staff. And I want to talk a little bit about just some of the updates, some of the recent reports that have come out on the coaching staff, where things currently stand there. As it feels like over the next couple days, over the next week or so, we should start to get answers here. You know, the list continues to dwindle of options for offensive coordinator and options as well as defense coordinator. It feels like defensive coordinator is pretty solidified, but nothing official, of course, yet. Now, obviously, Clint Kubiak, he took the job with the Seahawks, so that was a name, you know, coming over from New Orleans that was an intriguing option for this Jets team. Obviously, he goes to Seattle, so he's out the window. As for Nick Caley, you've heard some reports today, or not really reports, it's official. They interviewed him with the Bucs. Was hoping to potentially come here with the Jets, which is still possible, but it feels like, right, Caley going to the Bucs to get to work with Baker Mayfield, a job that is really, really promising for an offensive coordinator, getting to work with a quarterback like that, essentially in the prime of his career, where it's been revived now over the last couple seasons. I think that's a hotter spot for an offensive coordinator than the Jets. I think we're all being fair. I think that's honest. I think you'd be a little biased to say Caley would rather take this job. If you're Caley, you'd rather go work with Baker Mayfield in that offense as opposed to 1 year of Rodgers and in questions around, you know, the future 2026, draft a quarterback wherever they may go. We'll know more on that, of course, here as the year goes on and really what this regime's vision is. But Caley does still remain the top option, right? You know, he did interview for the Bucs job, and I would expect him to take that Bucs job, but he is still a guy that if he's open to coming here and Glenn really wants him and they can get this done, and the Bucs aren't much higher on his list than the Jets are, and he views both teams as the same, I think Caley's the top guy. I think most people would agree, right? He's, you know, coming over from the Rams, been with the Rams since 2023, was elevated to their pass game coordinator over the last season, tight ends coach each of the last 2 years, you know, this year pass game coordinator as well. He was also with the Patriots from 2015 to 2022. So I think there is definitely something to go say there that he's been with two winning organizations, was with New England in a variety of different offensive roles, working with Brady. And then now we're being able to work with Stafford and being able to work with McVay. McVay's talked a lot about him in a positive light. I wouldn't go as far as to say he's going to be the next Sean McVay, but there's people that have compared him and the way he thinks and the way he operates from an offensive and schematic perspective that he is very similar to McVay. Is he going to be the next Sean McVay? Who knows? Probably not. But he has drawn comparisons to McVay, the connection, of course, with the Rams, and kind of how people project him potentially here as an offensive coordinator. So Caley, definitely the top guy. It feels like, though, the Bucs will probably grab him, and that would probably make more sense for him. However, this opens up a door here for Tanner Engstrand, who is currently the pass game coordinator the last 2 seasons with the Lions. He's been with the organization since 2020. Has the connection with Aaron Glenn with Detroit. Dan Campbell has spoke very highly of him. So there's that connection right there. Now, Engstrand, for a while there, potentially seemed like he wouldn't be available. However, John Morton, former Jets OC, of course, made Josh McCown and the Jets offense very entertaining. Bulls then fired him for dumb reasons, such as he wanted to run the ball more, even though he took an offense with very minimal weapons and made it actually work. You know, Bulls ended up firing him, of course, but Morton now takes the job over with Detroit as the OC. So that opens up the door now for Tanner Engstrand to really potentially get the job here. If Kaylee goes to the Bucks, you're probably looking at Engstrand as the option here for the Jets with the connection with Glenn. Of course, there's other names, but that feels like the other hot name on this list, right? He's a guy that's also the Bears you heard potentially, but he's not going to go to Chicago because he's not going to be able to call plays. Ben Johnson's going to be the one calling plays there. So doesn't make sense for him essentially to go to Chicago, be the OC, but not be able to call plays. Wouldn't make sense. So it feels like Engstrand right now is probably the most realistic candidate. Kaylee always felt like it was going to be difficult for him to come here because you always felt like if Liam Cohen, who went to Jacksonville, you felt like if he was going to go there, that would open up the door. Bucks OC job now vacant. That would open up the door for him to take over. And that's the case here. It feels like that's at least going to be the case. Now, more on Engstrand. Right, we talked about it. Been with the Lions since 2020. Not a ton of experience, but a guy that, again, a lot of people from a West Coast offense perspective, ideally saw a lot of, worked under Ben Johnson, saw that offense flourish, saw Jared Goff, which I think there is certainly something to that. Jared Goff coming into 2021 was able to be a part of his success, his rise up the ranks after things seem like his career is just going to die basically in Detroit after the trade from the Rams. Of course, Stafford involved as well. And he was a part of that. And the Jets, of course, you have Rodgers this season. Next year, you're going to have questions about the quarterback. You have a guy that just saw an organization turn a journeyman into, a top 10, top 7 quarterback in the NFL. Potentially does that help? Hopefully, you connect the dots. Maybe that helps the Jets here down the road from a quarterback perspective, be able to develop that talent at that position. So, look, there's the defensive coordinator. It feels like it's going to be Steve Wilks. Those are the names on offense. Kaylee, Engstrand, it feels like are the finalists. I think Wilks is going to get the DC job. I think that's pretty clear. There's not much competition right now for him. I also think Glenn's going to make it a priority to try and get some experience on this staff, right? Wilks is a defensive coordinator with the the Niners rather in 2023. He was the Cardinals head coach for 1 year in 2018, was the Panthers interim in 2022 after Frank Wright was fired. So there's a lot of guys, there's a lot of experience there for, Wilks. And I really like the potential of Wilks. I really do. Because of the experience, former head coach can really help Aaron Glenn, in my opinion, learn and help him develop, right? I think it's important for Glenn. Again, we talk about it all the time. Robert Saleh's biggest issue was not hiring a good staff. His coaching staff plagued him here in New York. And I think it's important. And Glenn mentioned it yesterday. It's not about hiring friends. It's not always all about the connections. While the connections are important, I think Saleh sometimes got too caught up in hiring guys that he was close with, hiring guys, Mike LaFleur, of course, that connection, they go way back. I think Saleh sometimes got caught up in that. Glenn, I think it's about the best coaches, and it's about hiring guys with experience. And Steve Wilks, in my opinion, checks those boxes. And you can trust a guy like that to call the defense because he's done it before, and he's also been a head coach. Now, I also like the idea, and I think it's maybe even more important for Glenn to potentially get some former head coach or at least long-time tenured coaching experience on the offensive side of the football. We always talk about Sean McVay and Wade Phillips, right? When McVay took over that job as a first-time guy, Wade Phillips was one of his biggest mentors. He was a big reason why McVay has been able to have success. He was a big reason why he was able to early on have success as a head coach, was because Wade Phillips having his voice, having his leadership in that building. And what's more important about that is that was on the defensive side of the football, McVay's non-dominant side, right? McVay, an offensive mind. I think you try and get that type of voice, that type of experience, especially on the offensive side of the football, because it's not Glenn's expertise. He's a defensive mind. So while I really like Wilks as a potential option, and I think that's a good start, I do think you look down the list, you'd like to see some offensive minds too, with some maybe previous head coaching experience to kind of oversee things on the offensive side of the football. Of course, Glenn's side where he doesn't have the expertise in. and you bring up some names that have that experience. Todd Haley. He hasn't been in the league in a while. He was the offensive coordinator with the Browns in 2018. That was the last time. And I know people hear Todd Haley, and sometimes it scares them, right? The Steelers offensive coordinator 2012 to 2017 as well. Didn't go well necessarily, but you're not asking Haley to be the OC, right? You're not asking Haley to be the head coach. You're bringing him in as an assistant. You're bringing him in just as another voice, as a guy that can provide a little bit of leadership for Glenn and a guy that can kind of help Glenn out. Just experience, right? That's who you're bringing him in. You're not bringing him in to be the play caller. You're not bringing him to be the offensive coordinator. You're bringing him in to, be a positional coach or some sort of assistant, head coach or something like that. That's what you're doing. Offensive assistant. That's nothing more than that, right? Haley was the Chiefs head coach from 2009 to 2011. So he's got that experience. Another guy I really like, and I brought this up last week when they were interviewing both Lance Newmark and Aaron Glenn. I like Anthony Lynn. I'd actually probably like Lynn more than Haley, just because I think Lynn probably has more success in his background than Haley. Glenn obviously, or Lynn, been around for a while, similar to Todd Haley, but I think definitely had a little bit more. I mean, they kind of had both the same success as a head coach, really. I mean, Lynn's record definitely is better than Haley's was. They both did make the playoffs once, though. Haley in 2010. Lynn, of course, made the playoffs as well with the Chargers, I believe, 1 year. The thing with Lynn is, I would think Lynn would probably be more of a realistic option if Newmark was the GM, just because of the connection he had with him, right? He was the Lions offensive coordinator in 2021 when Newmark was there, and now he's the run game. He runs the run game coordinator and running backs coach for the Commanders this year, which is first year Newmark's there as well. So I think Lynn probably had more of the connection with Newmark. And I don't necessarily know if Lynn would now, would necessarily how he would come over in a lateral move, how that would all work out, unless if, again, you add, an associate head coach or assistant head coach to his tag, then you could do that. But I like Anthony Lynn. If you can maybe get a guy like an Anthony Lynn, and I'm sure there's a ton of other guys. These are just a couple names that to throw out there, right? Lions OC in 2021, so was there with Glenn. Run game coordinator now at the Commanders. He was the Chargers head coach from 2017 to 2020. So previous head coaching experience. I think he's a guy well-respected. Also, go back to the Rex days, was actually with the Jets, so has been with the organization before. So I do like Lynn as well, Anthony Lynn as well, as a potential offensive veteran staff option. Just another name, too, I'd throw out there as a potential offensive coordinator, maybe, because he was in the running for Detroit and a couple other places. That's Mark Brunell. Jets fans, we, of course, know. Back up to Sanchez in 2010 and 2011. Gotta love some of those, the hard knocks moments where Sanchez would always joke around about him having kids. And, Sanchez at the time, of course, year two. Brunell at the time, veteran guy, got kids, married, all that stuff. Some of those hard knocks clips are funny. Them making fun of him with his age. But either way, been the quarterback's coach with the Lions since 2021. Talk about the connection with Glenn, connection with the Jets as well. I would say maybe as OC, maybe again as a guy, hey, look, he's played, bring him in on the staff, potentially. We'll see. But those are some names, right? I think Engstrand is probably the least, or the most likely right now to get the job at OC. I think Kaylee's definitely the top option, but with the Bucs job opening up, it's going to be tough to get him to come here when you have a chance to work with, Baker Mayfield and everything they've got going over there. So, I think that's probably what we'll see, and we'll see how they, fill out. It feels like Wilkes is pretty much at this point. It's just a matter of when, not if, Wilkes will get that DC job, and then the rest of the way here. That's the most important, though. And the next step now, right? Glenn's introductory press conference, I think he hit a home run. I think it was really good. The next step now is, what does his staff look like? Right? We all have different steps, right? At the end of the day, it all comes down to winning, and that's ultimately how we'll grade these guys. If in 3 years from now, just like we all love Salah's press conference, right? But in 3 years from now, Salah's press conference last year, we weren't talking about, oh, well, he had a good press conference. No. If 3 years from now, this team still hasn't made the playoffs, none of it's going to matter. But you have to take it step by step. Press conference was good. Now next is making sure that they hire good staff. If they do that, or at least it looks good on paper, you like some of the experience, they get some proven names on there, that's good. And then you're able to move on. All right, what does free agency look like? Ideally, you can extend Garrett Wilson, figure out some of these contract extensions, figure out retaining your own. Who are you going to add? What guys from New Orleans and Detroit? Every coach has their veteran guys that they like to bring in. Muji as well. I'm sure there might be a couple guys that he's crossed paths with in Denver that he would love to potentially bring in here as free agent options. So what do those guys look like? As you kind of build your culture, you want some of your own guys that have been in your culture the last couple years with Glenn in Detroit, right? You kind of take a step by step here. The draft, of course, I think it's important for Muji, and I'll break this down in a video and an article as well. Muji's got to hit on some offensive talent in the middle rounds, something Joe Douglas never did. So all these things will ultimately, hopefully, add up to winning football. That's what matters most. So let me know what you think in the comment section down below. All of your thoughts on today's episode. Woody Johnson's comments, do they mean anything to you? Don't mean anything to you? I think for me, I've got to see it ultimately to believe it, but it's at least the first time he's at least seeming like he's trying to take accountability, or at least saying he's going to take accountability. And now's the time to just step away and let them, Muji and Glenn, do their thing. And what are your thoughts on some of potential options for Aaron Glenn's staff? So let me know all you think in the comment section down below. Until next time, JETS, 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 Jets.